It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 107 of the Property Podcast. I'm Rob B, with me is Rob D. Hello Rob, how are you today?
I am phenomenally well, thank you. Very well indeed. Very excited for a morning of talking about pensions. Yeah. This week we're going to be talking about pension reforms and property. Everything you need to know. We're not just talking about pensions generally. We're talking about the changes that are coming up that's going to affect the property market or not. And in this episode, we have to be very careful because given half a chance, we'll be looking at our watches. It'll be an hour in and Rob will still be giving his talk on the pension crisis that brought this about in the first place. So we have to be careful here, but it's going to be a really interesting episode. As well as that, a news story, a resource of the week. But first, a reminder, Rob.
This is like Christmas to me, this episode. I waited till 107. Come on, people, give me a chance. So what have we been up to? Well, I think the big news that we have to touch on, because it's such a massive project, this is not a small thing, is the magazine seems to be going from strength to strength. The subscription numbers are rising daily. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for getting behind this project. It means a lot to us. The amount of time we've put into this is bigger, more expensive, more hours, anything more than we've ever done before. In terms of commitment, this is a biggie. You know, more than a podcast, more than launching a forum, believe it or not, more than even putting a book together. So it's been a big project. So we really just appreciate the support and the trust that we promise you we're going to deliver an amazing product, an amazing magazine. But the trust that so many have given to us without even seeing the first issue to just go, yeah, you know what? I trust these guys to deliver something good. So thank you. If you want to subscribe, go to thepropertyhub.net/magazine.
Yeah, and the lady who's heading up our team putting this together said to us the other day, just listen to the podcast. Are you sure you've hyped that enough? And it's like, well, you better make it good now. We've certainly put ourselves under pressure, but we know that it is going to be good. We've seen the designs. We've seen the first drafts of the first few articles. We're getting into some fascinating topics, into a depth that we're just not able to in any other medium. So it is going to be great. But anyway, enough. Let's get on to the news. And this week, Rob, you've picked out a story from your best bud, Arnie.
Yeah, so I'm rapidly becoming obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you asked me 2 months ago what I thought of him, I'd have gone, yeah, he's all right, some good films. But now I just think he's incredible. Once you've listened, as I did, or read his book, you will be very impressed with the guy. He's controversial and you might not like all of his traits, and I'm not saying I do either, but there's certainly a lot of good more than the bad. And one of the things he's known for, which I didn't know actually, but appears in a very big way. He's known for his property investment experience, and he's in America, real estate. He's done it in a big way, and that's how he made his first fortune, was through property. Now, he's been to a property show in Australia. He's been doing a lot over there recently, and he did a headline speech, and he came up with 6 tips for success. So all the show notes, as normal, you can find them in one place, and this week they're at thepropertyhub.net/pension reforms. And you can see this article here. But here's the 6 points. 1, have a vision. We talk about that a lot. Have goals. 2, don't listen to naysayers. We always talk about who you surround yourself with matters. Don't surround yourself with negative people. 3, think big. We've done a whole episode on thinking big. So again, we'll link to that in the show notes. 4, sounds obvious, but not everyone does it. Work hard. So once you've set that goal, you've got that big vision, work hard towards it. 5, interesting, don't have a plan B. He says that just have that one goal so you're fully committed, don't have a backup plan. And 6, give something back, which I particularly like. Make sure that once you've made that success, it's for a bigger purpose, whether that's family, friends, a charity you're passionate about. You know, it's not about counting the pennies in your bank account and the pounds. It's about the bigger thing, and that's what Arnie talks about. So it's about giving back, doing more. So there's the 6 tips for success. It's laid out in more detail in the article if you're interested. But very, very interesting guy. Whether you like him or loathe him, you definitely can't ignore him.
Yep, and on your recommendation, I've actually started reading his autobiography. which I'm really enjoying so far. So much I didn't know. He is a seriously impressive individual. So I'm looking forward to my holiday next week when I'll be able to hopefully get through the rest of it. But yeah, I had no idea he was involved in property either. But Arnie's been around for a while. I'm not quite sure how old he is. Is he of pension age? I don't know. If he was, then I'm sure he'd be wanting to get his hands on his pension so he could invest it in property, as that's what he's already been doing. But is that something... I shouldn't be putting words in his mouth, really, should I? He's going to come around and beat me up. But anyway, is this something that you want to be doing? Then, well, that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. And even if you are nowhere near pension age, is it something that's going to affect the property market in a way that you need to know about? So on April the 6th, it's all change. The way that the pension system has been for years is changing in a pretty big way. And there's a reason for that. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of what's happening, Rob, this is your big chance. I know this is a subject which you are extremely passionate about. It's where the RMP in RMP property comes from. So give us the overview. Try and make it as quick as you can of why these changes needed to be made.
You might want to fast forward 2 minutes if you're not interested in the pension crisis. I'll keep it brief. I could do half an hour on this. The pension crisis, I think this has come about because we clearly are in a pension crisis. There's no doubt about it. While the wider public may not notice we're in a pension crisis, I really do think this is going to blow up in about 10 years. And people are going to realise how bad the pension situation is for the majority of the country. Because we're going through currently, the people retiring are that last wave of people who've got a semi-good pension. I'm not going to say they're brilliant, they're not, but something that maybe you're able to live off. For the majority of us, though, the normal pension provisions we're doing won't be enough. And here's why. There's lots of reasons why, but it's quite simple. The big reason why is we're living longer. Okay. Well, why does that matter? Let's say you retire at 65. 20 odd years ago, the amount of time you're expected to live would be less than it is today. And life expectancy is going up all the time, which is a good thing. But from a pension point of view, it makes things difficult because the amount of money you needed 20 years ago is a lot less than the amount you'd need today. And annuities, which is something you buy when you retire to pay you out until you die, annuities are paying out less and less and less every single year. So, for example, the average pension pot is less than 40,000 in the UK. Let's just say it's 40,000. If you were to retire now at 65, and bear in mind it'll be less in 5 years' time because these amounts keep going down, but if you were to retire now at 65 and you had an inflation-linked pension, so it goes up with inflation, then of that 40,000, you would be paid out less than £200 a month. So less than £50 a week in pension for an above average pension pot. That, for most people, less than 50 quid a week, is not going to be enough to live off. And that's the problem. It's getting worse and worse and worse. There are other aspects, and as I said, I could talk on this subject for half an hour, but I won't. I promise I'm stopping now. But because life expectancy increases nearly every single year, having the right amount in your pension to provide a good enough income for you to retire at 65 is becoming tough. And if you are under 50, I can assure you that in the future years, retiring at 65 will be aspirational. So you hear people now go, oh, I'd like to retire at 50. You know, that's kind of a number that people go, that I've done well if I'm retired by 50. That's great. And that is aspirational. That's a fantastic thing. But in future, I reckon within a decade, people will say the same thing about 65. It's not a given anymore. If you think you're retiring at 65 and you're under 50, unless you do something drastic, you're probably not.
Yeah, well, you're right to be passionate about this subject because, like you say, it is a looming crisis and it's something that like people, individuals and governments seem to have their head in the sand about because it's either scary or it's depressing or it seems like it's a long way in the future. But for some reason, it's something that people don't pay enough attention to. Not as much as in France, where I believe they're actually lowering the pension age or talking about it, which is just mad. But you're right, it is a crisis and it's something that is in the future going to come back and bite us, like the housing crisis that we've got now. You could have seen it coming 10 years ago, but no one did anything about it. It's the same kind of thing. But I guess with this, something is being done about it. And these changes are happening on April the 6th. And basically what's happening is it means that for the first time, you've got full flexibility over what happens to your pension. So previously, you had no choice but to buy an annuity. You have very little choice, very little control. Now you're going to have full flexibility. From the age of 55, you can take out as much or as little as you like, and you can do it in stages. So really, it's becoming kind of more like a savings account. It's a pot of money that you've built up, and then you can access it whenever you like. You can withdraw it all in one go. You can withdraw a bit every year, whatever you want. There are tax consequences, though. So whenever you take an amount out, the first 25% is going to be tax-free. Great. But the remaining 75% is going to be taxed at your current rate of income tax. So while you can get at your money, which is fantastic, there is going to be a tax bill attached to doing so. So flexibility is fantastic. That's a big upside. It means people are going to be given basically more control over what happens to them in their future, which I think is fair enough. It's money that you've saved up. It's your future. You get to choose what to do about it. But Rob, of course, there are downsides.
There are. So it's easy to look at this and go, wow, there's loads of positives from this. And we'll look at some of those positives, but I think it's important, essential to point out the downsides. The first one is some people will be irresponsible. Now, the Chancellor says, we can't treat people like children. If people have saved up money, they should be able to choose what they do with it. And I buy into it. I agree. But nevertheless, there will be people who are going to be irresponsible with their pension. They're just going to take it all out and blow it on holidays. And while that will be the minority, and it won't be a lot, there will be still people who do that, unfortunately. And, that's a massive waste. Something that you've worked a lifetime to put together is a waste. So some people will be irresponsible. Also, if you draw down this money in the wrong way, your tax bill could be high. So as Rob said, 25% of your pot is tax-free. So if you've got a 100k pot, the first 25k of that will be tax-free. But the remaining 75% will be taxed at your current tax rate. You've got to be careful and strategic on how you take that money out. So it's not to say don't do it, but just don't do it all in one go, because that would be ridiculous from a tax point of view. Be strategic, take it down in chunks and lower your tax bill. You need planning, for this. That we can't give you what amounts it should be each year. You need to speak to a financial planner, someone like Pete Matthew. If you're going to do this, we're not financial planners. And I think we should have said that at the beginning. This is not advice. This is just a take on what's happening. But if you're going to take the money out, make sure you're strategic and don't do it all in one go. Otherwise, the tax bill could be pretty painful.
But the temptation is always going to be there. And a lot of people are going to be looking at property and at least considering it. Why is that? You don't really need us to tell you. Property, of course, has higher returns than many other forms of investment. And a reason for that is leverage. So while you might buy a property and get a net yield of only about 3%, which is quite comparable to something that you could get in a long-term savings account or a basket of high-yielding shares, because of leverage, you can get higher returns with property than you would otherwise be able to. There's potential risk in there as well, but there are higher returns. Also, of course, there's capital growth. So because of the housing crisis that we've talked about and all manner of other reasons, it seems unlikely that property prices are going to suddenly fall off a cliff. Again, the risk is there. They might. But over the long term, you're likely to experience capital growth. And of course, a big factor, I think, it gives you something to pass on. So at that time in your life, you're thinking about your legacy. You're thinking about what you can pass on to your kids. If you've got an annuity, that dies with you. But if you've got a property, you can pass that on. Again, tax consequences, of course, but it is a tangible asset that you can pass on to future generations. So there's a few big arguments why people are obviously, their thoughts are going to turn to property when they hear about this new flexibility they've got.
Okay, so if you are going to do this, what type of property should you be looking for? So you want property that's going to generate a yield. Of course you do. The reason why you're doing this is you're looking for a better return. So properties that generate a good income, a good return, that's what you'll be looking for. However, you're going to want low time risk properties. So properties that aren't likely to give you a lot of hassle, because let's face it, you're meant to be retiring at some point. Most people are anyway. So if that's the case, you don't want a new job, which is called managing your property portfolio. So you want to target properties that are what I would call low time risk properties. So apartments are a good example of this. If you buy a good apartment with a good management company, the time risk involved is low. Newer properties, with a builder's guarantee, the time risk is low. So make sure you target those type of properties as well. So the area you target will attract a certain tenant profile. What tenant profiles tend to give you less trouble? Well, the middle, the professional range. And so you want an area that will attract that. So don't be fooled by areas that offer better yields but are in not the best areas, so therefore the tenants you attract might be a little bit more difficult. Go for better areas, and therefore the risk, your tenant risk, will be lower. So low time risk, low tenant risk, yield generating. And of course, if you can get some insurance or some guarantee that you're protected as well, your rent's protected. So for example, yellow lettings, and it's not the only one, so don't think this is a pitch just for yellow, offer a rent on time guarantee. If you can get some sort of guarantee in there that is going to protect you as well, that's only going to help things. Look for some sort of guarantee, some insurance product you can get to stop tenants not paying, or if they do stop paying, you're still covered. Low tenant risk in the first place, low time risk, and high yielding. So that's all great. You're looking at property. Lots of people will look at property. They'll look at those types of property. But what's going to happen to the property market if this all happens?
Well, that's the question that's been in all the papers. And the answer, I think, is that it will have some effect. It will have some impact on property prices. But will it be a game changer? Seems unlikely. I don't see everyone suddenly piling into property. I think that for many reasons, because of awareness. Some people just won't be aware this is happening. Some people won't have enough of a pension pot to actually be able to do it, because you've talked about how the average pension pot is only 40,000. That means there's going to be a lot of people who just don't have enough money to invest in property in the first place. There'll be a lot of people who are mindful of the tax consequences. There'll be a lot of people who think, at my age, I don't want the hassle of being a landlord, which is something you see in the paper a lot. That seems misguided to me because, as Rob said, if you pick the right type of property, it doesn't have to be risky. It doesn't have to be a time suck or anything like that. But I think a lot of people aren't aware of that. So there's a reason why not everyone is going to be rushing to the high street to cash in their pension, then pop into the estate agent next door. But it will have some kind of positive effect on property prices. I think what we can be sure of, unfortunately, is that these changes do mean new risks, because there are plenty of dodgy people in property, as there are in most industries, but especially in property, it seems, unfortunately, who are going to have all sorts of dodgy schemes and all kinds of ploys to separate people from their newfound cash. So there will be naive people who are frustrated with their pension, who want to be able to get into property. They see all the upsides that we've talked about, and there are going to be some very plausible seeming characters who are going to have some entirely unsuitable or overpriced investments to offer them. So that is something that I think that everyone should be very mindful of, and it just emphasizes the importance that we always talk about of doing your research. It's a particular risk if it's not something that you've been experienced in before. So important to, if you are going to be using the help of someone else rather than doing it alone, which is possibly a good idea, to check into their background and make sure that what you're being offered is legit. And hey, this is episode 107. Go back to the start. There's 106 episodes to get through. By the end of that, you'll certainly know what you're doing. More than 98% of the people who are trying to sell you stuff.
You will. So remember, the show notes for this episode, if you want to go into more detail, look at some of the links we've discussed, is at thepropertyhub.net/pension reforms. A different resource of the week this week, and it's not the cheapest one we've suggested. However, if you like your audio, you're a podcast listener, you might want to enhance that audio. And a gadget, or gadgets, I got my hands on a few months ago and have been very pleased with, are Sonos speakers. You may have heard of them, but basically Sonos speakers are a way of setting up wireless speakers in your home, and you can have different music in different rooms. You can control it from your smartphones or your iPads or whatever other tablet devices you may have. And it's really convenient, but also the tech side's great and what you can do, but the sound quality is absolutely fantastic too. So you can listen to the Property Podcast in all its glory, as my wife has to occasionally endure in the kitchen where one of our Sonoses are. You can, if you wish to punish other members of your family, listen to the Property Podcast or any type of music you wish. It links up to Spotify. It links up to Stitcher, which is a service that allows you to consume podcasts. It links up to all sorts. So it's really, really good. It's really, really techy. I love it, but the sound quality, most of all, is brilliant. If you do have a look at it, if you go on Amazon, the prices are the same everywhere. If you do look at it, there's the Sonos 1, 2 and 3. I spent lots of time researching, so I can save you some time and say that the 1 and the 5 are the ones to go for. So if you've got a smaller room, go for the 1. And we have a 1 in our office, and I have a 1 in the kitchen in my home. If you want something a bit bigger, so you've got a big lounge or living area, then look at a 5. I don't have a 5 yet, but I will get one. But my friend's got the 5, and he brought it over to our house in the summer when we had a barbecue, and it's absolutely fantastic. So the 1 or the 5s are the ones to look out for. Obviously, Rob, probably not for you as you move around so much. So not for the digital nomads, but for those who have their feet firmly in one place, this could be something to look at.
Yeah, but I do like the idea of being able to remotely turn on the property podcast in another room when my wife's in there and starting to talk to her. That appeals to me. That's good. I might see if I can fit one in my suitcase just for that.
I'd actually tell you a story. I when I was approaching the office a few months back when we first got it, I put the Darth Vader music on as I walked in. So the Darth Vader music started coming on. Do, 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 do. And then the door opened, I arrived. So they found that quite amusing. Well,
that's brilliant.
They made me feel good and laughed anyway. So, yeah, there are lots of immature things you can do with a Sonos as well. But not immature, and very mature if you do this, people who leave us reviews. So thank you to the following. Catherine. Catherine says, brilliant series of podcasts. I'm a newbie, but this is going to be my year. I've looked at a few of the property investment companies around, and I find Rob and Rob far more convincing. I can learn more in 10 minutes from them than an hour and a half elsewhere. I look forward to hearing more, and will let you know when I get my first buy-to-let under my belt. Well, Catherine, good luck with that. I hope it's going well. And if we can help, jump on the hub and let us know what's going on. If you're looking at the first investment and you're about to make that decision, share it on the hub. And you can not only get advice from ourselves, but lots and lots of switched on people.
Yeah, at the meetup the other week, I bumped into several people who all said that they'd bought their first investment since they started listening to the podcast, which is fantastic to hear. Love to hear that people are not just listening, but putting it to use and taking action. It's absolutely brilliant. I wish we could know how many people had started in property as a result of listening to the podcast, not as a result of listening to the podcast, as a result of taking action, doing your own thing, putting all the hard work in, but partially inspired by the podcast. They need to take a little bit of credit in there.
The reviews are great, but that is better than a review. But please, reviews are still great. Don't forget the reviews. Right. So next week we'll be back with another informative, entertaining, hopefully, podcast, which will be episode 108. But until next week, in honour of our love of Arnie, we'll be back with episode 108. And I'll say goodbye now. So, hasta la vista, baby. Sorry, Rob.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.